Over the last couple of years, I've been experimenting with growing houseplants on wood planks to get larger leaves, and I chose this method for a couple of reasons. One, it's a very low maintenance method. There really isn't much to it other than just letting it grow up the plank. And the other reason is simply for a cost factor, just because moss can be, and all the accessories can be quite expensive. And lately, for all my plants that need a support system, I've been using the THICCLY moss pull with really good success. I've seen really good results with using this method. So I did have a question recently from a viewer saying, am I abandoning the wood plank in favor of the moss pull? So the answer to that is both yes and no, and I'll explain that here in a second. As some of you may know, I am currently in a friendly competition with Matt from THICCLY. We're taking a small pothos cutting, we're rooting it in water, and then eventually we'll be placing it on a plank. And over the next year, we're going to record and document the process just to see who can get the largest leaf or largest leaves in a year's time. Now, I did run into one major issue when I was growing my Cebu blue pothos up a wood plank, and it reached the top. Once a plant outgrows its support system, whether that's on a plank or a moss pull, you typically chop and prop. So you'll take the top portion of the cutting and then place it lower in a new pot, and then you can continue to let it grow up, continuing to size up and get larger leaves. Now, the problem where I ran into with my Cebu blue pothos is once it reached the top, the aerial roots are not soil roots, so it will not support the plant if I chop the top off. So what I did, or what the easiest method was, is to air layer the plant. If you're unfamiliar with the air layering method, it's basically a process of getting roots on the stem before you make the cut. So normally when we propagate a plant, we'll take the cutting, we'll place it in water or place it right in soil, and then we'll let that rooting process take place. This is a little container with sphagnum moss inside of it, and you have to keep it moist pretty much at all times, and that'll entice those roots to grow into the moss. So once it is rooted, you can take the cutting, you can cut it, and then place it in a pot. So that's what I did with my Cebu blue. I cut out the bottom of a small pot and I placed it around the front of the stem and kind of wrapped it around to the back of the plank, and then I filled it with sphagnum moss, and I kept it relatively well watered or damp for a couple weeks. After a few weeks, I removed the pot and moss, and there really wasn't any sufficient roots large enough to sustain it if I was to place it back into soil. And basically the problem is I had it still attached to the plank. But when I put it on the plank and placed it in soil, it basically drooped really quickly. So it didn't work out the way I thought it was going to work out, and basically that top portion of the plant, it's in the trash right now. After it started to droop, I removed those cuttings from the soil and I stuck them in a container of water, and very quickly those soil roots, or those roots that I propagated in moss, quickly rotted in the water, and basically the plant died, and now it's in the trash. So that is a bit of a learning process for me. I thought for sure the air layering method would have worked. So with those poor results, I'm not abandoning the plank altogether. I just need to find a process or a solution to chopping and propping while on the plank. Now, the easy thing, or the good thing with moss pulls, is that the roots will grow into the moss and it'll obtain moisture and nutrients from the moss. And it has, or it should have, a sufficient enough root system that once it outgrows the top plank, you can take the top plank and then put it back in the bottom of the pot, and it should transition with really no issues. Now, that's not the case with planks, because aerial roots are not soil roots. They're simply for anchoring and stabilizing a plant. They may obtain some ambient humidity if you have very high humidity in your location, whether that's inside or outside, but primarily they are for support only, and they rely on all their moisture and nutrients from their soil roots. So that's an issue with the plank. So I've come up with a pretty simple solution to the problem, and I'm going to divert your attention to this very high-tech drawing on my piece of paper here. This right here is a pot. This is a plank right here. So this will be one section of plank, and what my idea is to cut out a section at the top of the first plank so that it has almost like a horseshoe effect, and then when you add a second plank on top, again, you're going to cut out just a little section like that. So as the plant grows up the plank, once it reaches this little section right here, I may place a little container at the back of the plank with sphagnum moss, so that when it grows up the plank, the aerial roots will grow into the moss, and then as it continues to grow up the plank, and like once it reaches the top, then I can cut this section. It should have enough soil roots or roots that obtain nutrients, where I can take this top cutting and then just put it back in the soil like that, and then I can continue that process as it continues to grow. So that is my solution, but I haven't done that yet. So like I said, I've been seeing really good success with this moss pole, or these thickly moss poles. So I have made kind of like a little hybrid with my planks currently. Here is my beautiful Marble Queen pothos, and as it reached the top of the plank, I had to come up with a simple solution. And what I did was I added a moss pole to the top of the plank so that the roots can grow into the moss. You can see there's some roots right there. I'm going to take all this apart here in a second just so you guys can see it. And I actually made a cut last night separating the two, like the top portion from the bottom portion here, just so it can callus over. What I'm going to do is take this top cutting and place it in the pot, and then just continue to let it grow and size up these leaves. So that is the temporary solution to the plank issue. I didn't want to chance this pothos with that air layering method again and have it like an absolute failure like the Cebu Blue. So here's the original plant. You can see it's still attached to the plank. So I do have a couple Cebu Blue pothos cuttings rooting in water. I'm going to be removing this plant from the wood plank, and then I'm going to do the same thing with my Philodendron Splendid. It has reached the top of the moss pole, and then here is the largest or the newest leaf. So I'm going to do a chop and prop with this beautiful plant as well. I absolutely love this one. I just had a single piece of tape on the bottom, and since I made the cut last night, it should be simply just taking off the top like this. Now I have this completely rooted section. I'm just going to take the saran wrap off just so you can see the roots. So look at those roots on the back. So that, ooh, and look at these. The saran wrap that I had on the front, see if you can see all these roots. So it should have enough roots, or it should have a root system to sustain these leaves, even though it doesn't have any roots growing into the soil. So the plan is to place some aeroid mix on the bottom of this, stick this in the pot, and then I can add sections of moss pole as it continues to grow into the moss and up the moss pole. And then I can just, again, just take the cutting, top cutting next time, once it starts to size up, and just continue the process so that I can continue to get large, massive pothos leaves. Now for the rest of this plant, I'm going to be taking it out and reusing this pot, but I just want to show the stem. I love how over the last year and a half or so, it just kind of zigzags all the way up the pole, and look at how much thicker the stem gets up to here. Like that is thick and beefy. So I'm going to take some propagated cuttings, or I'm going to take some node cuttings to propagate. The leaves themselves, they're just looking like trash. And I kind of relate that to it's probably root bound, or I know it's definitely root bound. Look at these roots. So it probably didn't have enough roots to sustain all of the leaves over the last little while. I definitely should have upsized it. And that's the difference between growing a plant on a moss pole. When the plant when the roots are growing into the moss, the plant will obtain moisture and nutrients, not only from the soil, but from the moss. The problem with planks is it really doesn't get any moisture or nutrients, like I said, from the aerial roots. These are strictly little support feet. So you can see all the little support roots up the wood plank. So it primarily, or it relies heavily on the roots in the soil, and this one is obviously root bound. So that's a downside to using the plank. I guess you just have to upsize the pot size over time, which moss pole plants, you can typically get away with a smaller pot size, which for my conditions, that would be beneficial because I have a lot of houseplants. So a smaller pot size would be beneficial to me. So that's kind of the difference between the root system on a wood plank as opposed to a plant on a moss pole. I'm going to use the butt end of my root rake here. This thing is solid. I want to save this pot because these pots, they're not cheap. And obviously I don't want to waste anything. I like to reuse as much as I can. So I'm just crunching. So many roots in this pot. I just don't want to break the pot. I don't care about the lower half of the plant. I'm not going to keep it. I'm just going to keep the thicker top nodes. Okay, come on. There's like a ton of roots at the bottom here. I'm just going to break them, just pull them off. And then that way I can slide the plant out. There we go. Oh yeah, this thing is super root bound. Look at these roots. That is, oh, it's just thick. So now I'm just taking my pruning shear and I'm just going to cut in between two nodes. And then look how thick this stem is. This leaf is starting to turn yellow as well, but yeah, I'm going to keep a few of these. Look at these roots. I love these aerial roots. That's why I love using the plank, is I find these roots just so satisfying. So you can see it has some thicker like anchoring roots, and then it has these like little caterpillar feet that latch on to the plank as well, just adding extra support. So satisfying. Now I'm going to take these into single leaf cuttings. Holy cow, these things are thick. Where my knife is really dull. Holy cow. It's like the center core is like rock solid. So I have 3 nodes with leaves. I'm gonna experiment with these and see if I can get larger pothos cuttings from these ones. But the rest of this, just so you can see, it's on there good. Like, you can pull it off. There. And it just falls over. Now I'm just, this is literally going to go right in the compost. So I'm going to take my wood plank out. And for those that are concerned about rotting wood, this is probably the worst kind of wood that you can place in a pot. This is pine. It's simply a bed slat from one of my kids' bunk beds. Other than being a little bit damp, there's no rotting on this, and it's probably been in the pot for almost 2 years. So don't worry about putting your plank in a pot. It's not going to rot and it's not going to fall over. At least I haven't had any issues with rot. I took the cutting over to the shower and I soaked the moss just so it can continue to get moisture and nutrients. But just look at these juicy roots on the back. So here is the pot. Now I'm just going to size up the placement of the cutting. So something like that. I'm going to put it maybe like 2/3 the way down, and then I'm going to add a little bit of soil at the bottom. So I am using the Molly's Aeroid mix, and then I have a little bit of leftover perlite, which I've used or previously used with some propagation. So I'm just going to mix some of this in with the extra perlite. So something like that, and then I'm just going to dump it in. Just making a little bit of a base layer at the bottom, and then I can place the cutting. Oh, I gotta put a little bit of mix in the bottom of this. So I'm just gonna tip it upside down, dump it in, like that, and that should be good. There, like that. And now I'm just gonna fill in the rest. So I'm just gonna, like I said, mix a little bit in there, mix it up, doesn't have to be anything perfect, and then just dump it in. Pack it down just so the pole remains upright. And there you have it, folks. Done. Okay, here's the finished product. I think it looks pretty good. It's just a short little moss pole. I'm definitely going to have to add an extension piece here fairly soon, but I'm going to place it back on the floor, and hopefully I have better results with this beautiful marble queen than I did with my Cebu Blue pothos. Look at this leaf. Gorgeous. Look at the variegation on it. And this newest one here too. Beautiful. Here's the container with the Cebu Blue pothos. So you can see it, I got 2 cuttings in here, and they do have some larger leaves. It's in just filtered tap water with this little air rock bubbler. So now I'm going to have a look at the roots. And you can see there is a new little growth point off of that node. So this is exactly what I want. The roots on this one, probably not quite ready for a moss pole yet, but this one I looked at earlier, and again, it has a growth point right there. It's got some really nice looking leaves on here as well. but the root system is much farther along, and it actually has a little bit of secondary roots as well. So this cutting I'm going to be putting on a moss pole, and then hopefully I can continue to get larger leaves. So these ones are pretty decently sized, but it shouldn't take long for the new growth to size up to something like this and then get those beautiful fenestrations which my original plant had. I'm going to be using THICCLY's new grow pole. This is the 3.0, I believe. And the difference between the two moss poles is that this one actually connects or ties up in the front, whereas the old moss pole, even though it's completely encased in the back, it had those little tabs in the back. So the reason why they have this style is you can actually undo the front. If you need to take a cutting or chop the plant up, you can do it from the front and then remove the entire plant and the moss, whereas the old style you would have to pull the roots through the front, if that makes sense. But anyways, I'm going to be using a slightly smaller pot as well. I figured it's probably not a good idea to just jam one small little water propagated cutting in a giant pot like this. So I'm going to set this aside for when it outgrows the smaller terracotta pot. So I'm going to start off with putting a little bit of moss into the moss pole here first. I just kept this cutting in water just so it didn't dry out. So I'm going to place it like that. I'm just going to size it up here quick. So obviously, ooh, I don't know if I can stick that root. Actually, it'll be okay. Something like that. I'm going to place it right at the bottom just so those roots can be in the soil, and then I want that aerial root to be on or in contact with the moss. So I'm just going to use some little plant Velcro, and I'll secure it, and then I'll add soil, and then this project is done as well. We'll go like that. And I'm going to secure it just up here for now, and I might add another piece just up here at the node. Actually, I'm just going to place that right on that top node for now. I'm just going to wrap it around so it ends up looking like that. The node is in contact with the moss, and the new growth point should just continue to grow up the moss pole here like that. Now, a nice feature about THICCLY moss poles is they have these little tabs that you can fold inwards so that when you add medium like sphagnum moss, it doesn't just like come out the bottom. So I'm going to add a little bit of the aeroid mix to the bottom of the moss pole, and then I'm going to add the plant into the pot like this. Now, the key is to not letting these water roots dry out over the next like 2 weeks or so. I'm going to keep it well watered just so those roots don't dry out, otherwise it's a goner. Making sure everything's set up nice and straight. Just going to add in the mixture here. I'm going to use a little bit of the leftover stuff just at the back here just to help stabilize the moss pole. And then I'll top it up and just lightly pack it down. Then I'm going to take this over to the shower, and I'm going to give it a good spray down here. So like I said, I don't want those water roots to dry out. Otherwise, it's a goner. It's cleaned off, I sprayed off the leaves, and I gave it a good thorough soaking. You can see there's some water in the bottom of the saucer there. And then here's the little growth point. So hopefully it doesn't take too long to get to the size of leaf like this, and then continue to size up and get those fenestrations. Okay, now this one's going to be a bit more of a challenge just to getting it out. This newest leaf is beautiful, and I don't want the plant to fall out of the pot. There is 3 moss pole extensions on this, and just so you can see, it's in a very, oh shoot, I hit the top of the roof. Hopefully I didn't break that newest leaf. It's in a very small terracotta pot. It's like a 4-inch pot. So I'm just going to put this right here for now. Actually, I'm going to lay this down, and then I'll show you close up. I'm just going to flip this around just to show you the roots in this one. So we got roots all up and down. And here is where the first and second moss pole connection is. I'm just going to remove this top tie here first. Really didn't need to do that, but just so you can see, this is where the two moss poles connect. So I'm simply just going to cut that stem all the way through. And as long as there are roots not growing too far down, I should be able to just separate the two, which it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to just because there's roots in there. So I'm just going to pull it like that. And I may have to, oh, actually no. It was just the little tabs holding them together. So I have my whole section of my top two moss poles, which I'm going to place back in the pot. But first I'm going to take this over to the shower and give it a good spraying because the moss is pretty dry. I'm going to do the same thing with this plant. I'm going to remove it from the pot, and you can see, or I just want to see what the roots look like. So not a large root system by any means, just a nice size for this pot, nothing root bound. So you can see a lot of the, like it was a very large plant, or it is a very large plant, and a lot of the root system in the moss was providing the moisture and nutrients. So very small root system for the pot, which is perfect. So I'm going to reuse this pot. And now what am I going to do with these cuttings? Or what I'm going to do with this bottom cutting? I'm actually going to propagate these into their own new plants. And I do have some previous Philodendron splendids in my little perlite prop box. I did take some individual node cuttings, and you can see they're nicely rooted, and yeah, it did produce a new growth point like that. So these are definitely ready to be potted up in the soil. I just have no idea what I'm going to be doing with them yet. I do have a little project planned in the next coming month or so. I do have a number of plants that I have taken some cuttings from, so down the road I may be selling some of these cuttings, like these Philodendron splendids. So keep your eye out for that if you're interested in any cuttings. Okay, I'm going to bring this piece up. It is thoroughly saturated. I'm going to put my stuff right there. I'm going to put, you can't even see me. I'm just going to size up the pot here. So looks like this lower leaf is going to be beneath the soil. So I'm just going to cut this lower leaf off, just like that. And then I'm going to add a little bit of the aeroid mix just to the bottom of the moss pole here. Just using the old stuff. And then for the rest of the soil, I'm just going to use a new mix here, or some new soil. So place the pot like that. And now I'm just going to add some new soil in here. Just trying to make room so you guys can see what I'm doing. A little top heavy just because there is so much weight with the moss pole being thoroughly watered. So I don't know if you can see anything here, but it's going to make a little bit of room. Move this over here. There. Just packing this down good as well. I don't want this pole to fall over. I'm just making sure it's nice and straight. Making a mess as per usual. There. Just really packing that down, and then I'm going to add a little bit of soil at the back. I'm going to use the old stuff because it's not as chunky, and that way it can fill in these little gaps at the back, just like that. And then I don't necessarily have to go water this one, just because there's no roots that are going to be growing into the soil for at least a little while. But just to help settle the soil, I'm going to take it over to the shower and give it a good soaking. Okay, something like that. Get this out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. And yeah, I got a bunch of dirt on the leaves here too, so I want to just clean that up just so it doesn't look so dirty. And I'm really packing it down at the back here, and you can use your trusty old pencil just so this thing is stable. I don't want it flopping over. So here's the finished product. I'm really happy with how it turned out. The leaves are nice and clean. I just brought it over from the shower and gave it a good soaking. I should make mention that in my experience with philodendrons specifically, they do not attach to a wood plank like a pothos would. They don't have those big chunky aerial roots as well as the smaller ones to latch onto a wood plank as good as it does with a pothos. I find that the philodendrons, they do very well on moss. Otherwise, definitely I'll be providing some updates down the road. Thanks for watching this video. I think that's going to be it. Take care, everyone. Bye.